This morning, I'm going to be sharing information about the failed mutual interest agreement between the Office of the Governor and CNX Resources. Radical transparency was not achieved. In fact, what you will hear today shows a possible hidden agenda between CNX Resources to deceive the governor, families, and decision makers of this Commonwealth. On November 2nd, 2023, the Office of the Governor and CNX Resources entered into a mutual interest agreement, holding a press conference at CNX's NV 110 Radical Transparency Well Pad in East Findlay Township, Washington County. Their goal was to support the assertion that fracking can be done safely, while ignoring the Department of Health's fracking study and many other studies showing health concerns for people living within the shale drilling. Residents living within the zone of presumption were not invited to the press conference, nor were they told about the Radical Transparency Initiative that promised transparency. The very next day, November 3rd, a family within the zone of presumption lost their drinking water. That began a series of months-long water complaints made to the DEP from several people living within the zone of presumption of the Radical Transparency Well Pad NV 110. CNX began to deliver water to the affected families. I know one person whose water was so badly affected that he was having health problems. He often tells me that I saved his life by knocking on his door that day. These people are fearful of speaking out against this company and the Office of the Governor. They ask that their privacy be protected. For the last 2 years, these families have asked me to help them meet with the governor about these issues that have been forced upon them. And for those 2 years, that ask has fallen on deaf ears. That is why I am here today. The radical transparency process required families to agree to have a post-drill water testing done at their homes and opt in to have those results publicly disclosed. I have learned that CNX withheld post-drill water results of families that opted in. This is a direct breach of the mutual interest agreement, which states that water results would be posted publicly subject to landowner approval. Most alarming is that the methods used to analyze their water samples were for non-potable water, not for drinking water standards. We need to demand the answer as to who ordered this specific water test. Additionally, the company that CNX contracted to conduct these water tests was found by the DEP to falsify water testing results. Audits were conducted and found, quote, hundreds of cases of manipulated or falsified data, as well as hundreds of missing records and cases where samples were mishandled. The failures of this mutual interest agreement have negatively impacted the governor's reputation in my community, slowed current health and safety policy changes regarding fracking setbacks, and most importantly, negatively impacted the families who received unreliable post-drill water sampling under the Radical Transparency Initiative. On April 27th, 2024, after numerous water complaints to the DEP were filed within the zone of presumption of NV 110, the data on CNX's website concerning that very well was archived. Make no mistake about it, families in the Marcellus Shale region will no longer tolerate the systemic disrespect by leaders within this capital or the oil and gas industry. The time is now to enact the setback recommended by the grand jury. We can no longer tolerate charades like the Mutual Interest Agreement and Radical Transparency Initiative. The data proves fracking harms people has been readily available for years. Thanks to the Radical Transparency Initiative, it is clear how far companies will go to hide information proving that setbacks are needed to protect people from the harms of fracking. This will not be tolerated and is in fact unethical and morally reprehensible. There is still an opportunity for the governor to adjust course and show up for my community as he did in 2020. The harms of the Mutual Interest Agreement must be addressed. The impacted families are demanding that, one, the governor meet with the families living within the zone of presumption of all radical transparency sites at a private community meeting in Claysville, Pennsylvania within 1 month. Two, the water of families living within the zone of presumption of all radical transparency sites must be retested using accredited labs and appropriate standards for drinking water. Three, the DEP must audit the integrity of Eurofins testing protocols. Four, the DEP must disclose any collaboration with CNX's Radical Transparency Initiative to reassure the public that they are not involved in the post-drill water sampling analysis recommendations made to CNX. Five, based on the scientific data that has been presented thus far, the governor must use his power to immediately implement the 2,500-foot setback as recommended by the 43rd Statewide Grand Jury by initiating a regulatory change at the Department of Environmental Protection. Pennsylvanians no longer have questions about the public health and safety risks fracking presents. We know that it harms health and our way of life. This was made clear in the Pennsylvania Department Health's fracking study that if a child lives within 1 mile of an oil and gas facility, they have a 5 to 7 greater chance of getting lymphoma. The data presented by the Radical Transparency shows harm and the length that oil and gas companies will go to hide the harms from families, communities, state lawmakers, and our governor. The residents of this Commonwealth deserve to be protected, and that protection will begin with a common sense setback reform initiated by our governor immediately. Thank you.